All right, so here's a demo on how we're gonna do some ways to upgrade a C++ plugin. So this is probably a good time to actually demo this because we have 5.7 that just kind of hit preview. So we're gonna try to upgrade. I guess you will use HoudiniEngine as an example to 5.7, and we're gonna create a C++ project. So there's a couple of ways to do this. So we're just gonna launch it from the Epic launcher here. So there's two ways to do it. I guess you can do it directly to a C++ project, but the way that I usually do it is I make a standard blueprint project and then I convert it to a C++ project. So we're gonna kind of go through that process. Because this is on my side monitor right now, the splash screen is actually over here, so I'm just dragging it over. So once this loads, we're gonna be creating a C++ class from a blueprint project, and it's gonna generate a solution, and then we're gonna open it in Visual Studios. So normally you open it up, it looks something like this. So we go to games, go to blank, and then we're gonna be, so like I said before, you can actually do it as C++ directly. I generally don't do it this way, but you can. So I generally go to blueprint, target platform desktop, and then I usually put it into my lab area. You can put this anywhere you want. And the common feature, standard that I use to denote that a project is C++, I'll use something like CPP in the project name, and the standard suffix just to keep my notation standard for my pipeline stuff. So blank games and the C++ naming. Do create. Once that's up, it's going to relaunch. It's going to be C++ here. And at the moment, if we take a look at the folder, if I can get it open, here we have C++ 5.7, and it's just the standard layout. There's no solution at the root project here. So if you look at my previous ones, we'll get a C++ solution file here, as well as other extra folders. So coming back to here. Because we don't have plugins and we're going to be compiling plugins, we're going to create a plugins folder here just to keep this around, so that we're going to be putting our plugins in here shortly. But without creating this folder, it's not going to build it yourself unless you bring in some plugins to the project local level. And we're not going to be compiling it from the engine in program files, so it's good to have a local plugins folder here for starters. All right, now that 5.7 is open, we're not going to do too much here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to, let's see if we can, new C++ class. And you can make anything you want technically, but I generally use a dummy actor class, and any class from function library, any of the stuff should be able to get you into a C++ project once you've added it. So going to here, and you go to public. Actually, wait, should not click that. Let me do this again. Go to here. I actually know that doesn't matter. Just make it public, private, and then I'll leave everything default. My actor standard. You don't have to click the class type per se, but just clicking that, it's going to add code. So you can see it's generating source folders here now, and it's generating the project file. So after this is all done, you should have a solution file here. And I believe there's actually one other way you can like generate Visual Studio project files if you right click it. So that also technically turns it into a C++ project. So there's a couple ways to do it. So if you see that because we generated it, we have the source folder and then we have the public private with our actors in there now. It's just like a dummy thing to make sure that it's both C++ and you have some C++ classes locally to compile to make this happen. So once this is done, they'll say like close, include sources, to close the editor and build from IDE. Would you like to edit the code now? I generally click no. I open it manually myself. But from this point on, you generally want to close the editor because this is like a vanilla launch from the U project file. You want to launch it from a build editor from Visual Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and go into the solution file. Make sure you have Visual Studio installed. Usually the latest version is best. Sometimes the latest version is actually not good. There are cases where the latest version won't compile the latest output from Unreal, and usually it's like a backwards compatibility issue or like one's trying to one up the other. So just make sure if you run into those issues, you might need to check the forums. Sometimes the forums will say, hey, I'm running into this issue as well. You need to roll back to a specific version, like a couple versions back, just to make sure that you can still compile the project. It happens sometimes, but not usually not the end of the world. And if you need to do that, it's just to go into Visual Studios and then changing the versions. But going from here, now we have this the project open. This should be your default, but if it's not, make sure you're in Development Editor, Win64, and you can click this directly, or just go. It should be F5, so start debugging. And if you want to, you can open the source code as well, but I'm just pressing F5 right here. So you'll see that there are some issues. So let me see what's going on here. So sometimes you'll have these issues. There's a couple of scenarios. One is something is broken. So like this could be the case, like I said, it's missing a tool chain. So this could be the case where I'm saying you do need to maybe download a newer version of Visual Studio, or you need to update some tool chains. Sometimes you'll also see the error list, which is very poorly described. It will almost looks something like this. You might need to check your output log just to see what other errors could be. So a good example of where this could also happen is if you have Unreal running, like if I didn't close the editor just now, and you're trying to build the editor for this project, it's not going to let you build it as well. So I'm going to come back to this in a bit. I'm going to make a cut point here, and I'm just trying to figure out if I need to update or uninstall certain things or reinstall certain things to make 5.7 compilation work. So continuing from here, we're going to actually update Visual Studio Installer. So if you do a search in your start menu for Visual Studio Installer, we're going to here, Visual Studio Installer. This should come default when you install Visual Studios, and there are some updates. So we're going to do a quick update here, and I'm going to hit yes. And we're going to quickly update this and see if we can compile again. So I'm not going to keep all the update process in the video because there's generally no options involved, but it can take a while, sometimes up to like 5-10 minutes or maybe even longer to update this. So I'll come back after the update has been completed. Okay, well, this seems going to be going a lot faster. Just going to give this a little bit more time. One other thing to note is that while you're installing this Visual Studio, you probably want to close your Visual Studio as well, because earlier I actually didn't close it, so it might have some problems trying to close things to uninstall, reinstall. So do make sure, you might get a pop-up window, so you make sure you close Visual Studio before you continue as it's trying to update some components. But as you can see, as it goes down through this process, it's going to take a while to download. So I downloaded about 60 gigs in this recent upload, and it's going to, or this recent update, and it's going to start installing the packages. All right, now that we have Visual Studio reinstalled, it should look something like this. There's no more update button here. You can still modify to install additional components, but it should look something like this to note that you're running the latest version. So we're just going to give this a shot. We're going to open up our solution file here. And ideally, the settings should persist, so make sure you're on Development Editor 164 and the sorts. Yep, and then we're just going to hit F5. Hopefully, this should start building now. Close Copilot. So while you're building, you can see that all of this gets disabled, and you can actually cancel the build if you really wanted to, but usually just leave it alone. Allow this. So you can see that it's going to show you the things that are being compiled. So when you're doing a C++ project, generally you're not building from full source. So that means you don't have to build a whole engine code and wait a few hours. It's just trying to build everything as it needs locally in the project. And usually if you don't change the code, it's not going to detect any changes and you don't need to rebuild everything. But if you do make C++ changes, it's going to usually be smart enough to figure out which things have changed and rebuild those guys. We can see here it's going through 9 items. Once that's done, it should be quicker for the subsequent ones. And once it's successfully built, it should look something like this. You can see the log start piling in, and you're able to stop the process as needed. But you can see that the splash window and the editor is running both now at the same time. I'm just going to close this real quick. Close window. But yeah, so if you do any crashes in engine, it should take you directly to the line of code where it crashes now. So you're able to see whenever anything goes wrong, where the exact spot happens in code when you have a C++ project. All right, so now that we're in C++, we're not going to do anything at this point because our whole goal is just to actually compile a C++ plugin. So we're going to either close this or we're going to kind of do it the other way. We're just going to hit stop here and it's going to force close the application. So if you do click the close on the Unreal Editor window, it'll take a while, but eventually it will also get your solution back to the state where it's not loaded at all. So just heads up, there's different ways to close the project. So coming back to here, we can see that because we did compile now, there's also a binaries folder now. So that's where the editor and other stuff is running out of as well. So we're going to hit F5. And there's also intermediate DDC and all this other stuff that normally exists. So from here, we're going to start piling in our plugins. So right now it's empty. So there are a couple of ways we can bring the plugin in. So one is if we were doing it from the Houdini folder, we can usually go to the Houdini folder under Engine, under Unreal, and then you can pick a version, like an older version. And there's also, so or you can also go from our perforce one. So keep in mind, because these are on the perforce workspace, this is the plugin workspace, not the project workspace, the plugin workspace. It'll look something like this. And these are all read only. So if you are copying from this version as an example, you make sure you want to set them to read or write enabled. So because perforce locks the files. So in this example, we're going to try to do it from our perforce one as an example. So we're going to copy our 5.6 one here, and we're going to paste it in here. And just as a convention, I'm going to rename it. So when you're compiling it for a specific engine version, you don't need our naming suffix. Our naming suffix is primarily used for our remapping purposes. So in this case, we don't need it. So if you can also press Alt-Enter, or you can go right-click Properties and uncheck the read only, and then apply to everything inside, and that should make it write enabled. If you don't do that, when you compile, it's going to complain that things are not writable. Okay. Another one of the things to notice is that inside of any C++ plugin, there are ways to tell that it's a C++ plugin. It's very similar to a project. You usually see these 3 folders here that denote that there are source code. And one other thing to note is if you open up the plugin here, usually you'll see that it also has modules. So only C++ plugins generally have modules. And with the specialty of the modules, you can also see that there's an important thing called loading phase. It shows you what phase it loads. So it's like before the splash screen, after the splash screen, etc. We're generally not going to need to fiddle with these, but it just need to know that these are here so that it determines that there's source code to compile, and then it's going to find the dependencies in your source and then generate the binary intermediate and stuff. So as a common practice, I generally delete intermediate binaries. You don't have to, but generally I do because it might have latent stuff that doesn't get purged when you do a different engine build. And this makes sure that when you do a build, it will build and use the latest, or it'll generate only files against the specific engine version. So this is kind of the format that we submit to Fab as well, because Fab does their own builds, so you don't need to submit binaries. And this keeps the plugin fairly lightweight with just source files. Okay, so from here, we have this clean folder here, and we're going to come back to here, and we're just going to hit F5 again, and you should see that there's more stuff to build now. So hopefully this works. Generally, a lot of times it should just work. So you can see there's a lot of stuff to build now. So one of the things to note, you can see that there's also the new intermediate binaries that are getting generated. So there are times where you have C++ plugins that are closed source, and that usually what happens is you'll have like an intermediate binaries, but no source folder, and the plugin references the modules that are being used. Like a good example of this was like the old MetaHuman plugin that was part of a plugin rather than being part of engine source in 5.6. And in those parts of the code, it's really tricky. A lot of times you need to bug the original plugin author to get an updated version to rebuild. There are times where you can actually go into the binaries here and try to hack the hex codes to trick Unreal into recognizing the plugin. So there are ways to do that as well, but generally not best practices. One other thing to note is to get rid of some warnings is that not always, but sometimes you'll see engine version. I probably deleted it in mine here example, but we're going to open the one from HoudiniEngine as an example. So let's go to here, see if I can find it again. Let's see, yeah, so here 5.6. If you go to HoudiniEngine here and we open up HoudiniEngine from here, Let's see if they have it. Okay, I guess they don't have it either for sanity. But there are cases where, or when it's one of the requirements to submit to Fab, is that you must explicitly define an engine version in the U plugin. And if you don't have it set up that way, you will see warning messages saying that, hey, Unreal cannot open this or cannot use this plugin. So we're going to do an example really quick, if we can as well, to show that not working. So we're going to launch 5.7 and we're going to create a standard 5.7 non-C++ plugin, and we're going to toss in the 5.6 version of the plugin just to show that example of it not working. So while I'm loading this will probably start complaining after it hits 210 that it can't compile certain things. But you can see here that there's an error. So this is probably a backwards compatibility issue. So meaning that 5.7 deprecated some stuff that the 5.6 plugin requires. In these scenarios, it gets really bit tricky. You may need to go in and uninstall a specific, or you need to go into the source code and comment some stuff out just to make sure this works. But usually you'll see, if you see something like this happen, it means that the plugin from 5.6 is using a class type that is no longer available in 5.7 or whatever engine version you're using. So these cases are very tricky. You can technically comment it out and then deprecate some features, but the general way to fix it is you need to wait for the third-party like side effects to patch this. If you don't wait for them, you can also patch it yourself, but you need to kind of look at the change logs between 5.7 and 5.6 of the Unreal Engine and see why this was deprecated, why streaming proxy, or maybe it was renamed, right? So if you read in the change logs and it's renamed, you need to go in and rename this, and you should be able to get past this compile error. So you can see there's more things going on here, but warnings generally are fine, but errors are no-go. So once you have an error, you're no longer able to compile the plugin. But you can see here that, yes, there are some breaking changes to the plugin here. So we'll come back to this, but we're going to create a C++ project or a standard blueprint project and show the errors that may occur when you try to toss in a C++ plugin that is built for a different engine version. So we're going to go back to here. We're going to go with lab. So this is going to be our non-C++ one. We're going to call it lab 5.7 with the blueprint. Create it. So because we aren't able to compile HoudiniEngine, I'll pick another plugin that I have locally that I know will compile for 5.7, and I'll show it in both context of it not working for 5.7 as well as it working with 5.7. Okay, so coming to here, so we have, okay, so we're going to have 5.7 here, and we're going to go into our 5.7 content folder here real quick, and we're also going to stub in some stuff. So we're going to go back to lab, we're going to go to 5.7 now. And we're going to create that plugins folder that we were missing before. Alrighty, so we're going to close 5.7 first, and we're going to pick a different plugin. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up Restart Editor. So Restart Editor is a third-party free marketplace plugin that I always use, or have to rebuild from C++ every time I have a new engine version. So going to Restart Editor here, you can see here, very similar to HoudiniEngine. I only have the 5.6 version. We're going to copy this, and we're going to put it in our 5.7 standard project first, just to show it as an example. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to close this real quick. So you can see here that we just tossed in a 5.6 plugin. And just for sanity case, we're just also going to make it write enable just in case. And we're going to try to launch 5.7 project with the 5.6 plugin, and you should see almost immediately that it can't do it because it says, hey, the Restart Editor has some modules that are built with different engine version. Rebuild them now. Generally pressing yes, this never works, so I'm not going to do it this way. So I'm going to press no, and then you're going to see something like this. This is built with a different engine version. Would you like to proceed? I generally just go no. So what do we do from here now? So one other thing to note, I think if we go to the U plugin here, just a quick check. Actually, yeah, it doesn't have engine version because I yoinked it. But what to do from this point on is what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and we're going to put it in our C++ project like we did before. So now we're going to enter C++ project. We're also going to delete HoudiniEngine because we actually know that we can't compile this because it's got some deprecated classes and features. And we're going to close this just to make sure we can delete it properly. Give me one sec. Yes, I do need to break the build, I think. Cancel. And hopefully I can end task. There we go. Try again. All right. Do it once more. HoudiniEngine. All right, now that that's cleaned out, I'm going to launch the solution again. So now this is back in our C++ project with just the restart editor. Yeah, plugins, we just with the restart editor here. And we're going to rebuild this from C++. So we're going to close these guys since we don't need them anymore. Hit F5. And Unreal is really smart, or not Unreal, the Visual Studio is really smart. It will detect that there are folder changes, and it's going to compile if things are changed. If nothing's changed, it's not going to recompile anything. So you can see we did 8 new files, and it generated the binary. So just as a quick example, I'm actually just going to delete, make sure we do the same process. We're going to delete the intermediates and the binaries. And we're going to hit F5 again to make sure that we are generating only new binary files and we don't have any latent intermediate or binary files for 5.6. All right, so you can see this is compiled correctly. It's running at 5.7, and we'll see if it's actually included as well. So we go to our plugins, when we go to restart editor, yep, you see it's here, and it's also here as well. So this is an example of a successful C++ plugin that has been built for 5.7 now. So now that this plugin has been compiled with the new intermediate and binaries, we can lift this plugin. We're going to do a control copy, and we're going to put it in our standard blueprint plugin. So we're going to delete this one. This is our 5.6 one that we were using before, and then we're going to paste it in. So this is our newly built one that we just built from Visual Studio with the with the 5.7's engine version. And when we go to the U project and we just double click it, it should just load and it won't complain. So yeah, that's pretty much the general gist of how you need to recompile C++ plugins to make sure that it's working against newer or different engine versions. So you can do this is the 5.6 vanilla, and we have restart editor here. So if you're doing a content only plugin, so in that case, you just need to copy from the old folder to the new folder. So as an example here, let's say we go to like our MetaHuman Ada here. Let's see here. So let's say we have our perforce workspace for Ada that looks something like this. If we want to upgrade from 5.6 to 5.7, we could just do Control C, Control V here, and then change this to like 5.7, and then push this to perforce. And then you have a new mapping path for a plugin that is usable in 5.7 now. And keep in mind that we only go from lower version to higher version. If you did like 5.6 to 5.5, generally you're not gonna be able to see the U assets because Unreal is really finicky on the versions. So just keep in mind that if you are doing the upgrades, always go up, don't go down. So if you really need to generate like a 5.3 or 5.2, you might need to do it from other ways, or try to get older versions, because generally you're not able to downgrade it. There are plugins on the Fab Marketplace to do downgrades, but it gets very involved, and we're not going to cover it in this video. But just to note that these are the paths generally to upgrade a plugin. So one is you do it from the C++ project, like we just did in this video. The second way is to contact the vendor. The 1.5-ish way is you find the error in the source code, you patch it and you build it, and then you wait on the third party to provide a proper patch. And the last scenario is you just have standard content only plugins that don't have source code, and you just copy it from one version to the next version, upload it onto Perforce. So on Perforce, you would have something like this, where it's just a stream or a workspace for a specific MetaHuman stream, and you just do the suffix version onto there, and then you have a mapping path that will work with Launcher or Perforce Manager. And I think that covers all the specific details on how to upgrade a plugin. So we covered a lot of stuff. So, but in most cases, if you're trying to upgrade a C++ plugin yourself, I'll just summarize. Just create a C++ project, make sure that it has a solution file, like we just did. In one of the many ways you can create a solution file. And then open the solution file, create a plugins folder, put your plugin into the plugins folder here, remove the suffix if needed, and then make sure it's write enabled. Open the solution, look something like this, press F5, you should see a bunch of stuff build. Once it's up and running, you have a good version of the plugin. And then if you wanted to, you could go into, like for example here, we have restart editor. I can create a new folder called restart editor 57. And then I can just copy the contents in there and upload it to perforce. And then you have a version that is built yourself for a specific engine version. Yep, and that's it. Thanks.